Welcome to the Everyday Veteran Podcast. I'm your host, Marine Corps veteran Pat Keplinger. The mission of this podcast is to educate, motivate, and inspire you and your family to live your best life post-military service. One of the ways we do that is by telling our stories of service. And tonight, the Marine Corps birthday, we have a very special guest tonight, Marine veteran Blake Weller. Blake served with 2-7 in Iraq and Afghanistan and is a recipient of 2 Purple Hearts. Blake is going to share with us an incredible story of what it was like in service in Iraq and Afghanistan. He also is going to talk to us about service after the Marine Corps and what he's been doing since. His story is like all of ours. It inspires us and it motivates us. And for all my Marine buddies out there, Semper Fi and happy birthday. Blake, thanks for coming. Appreciate having you here.
Thanks, man.
So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
All right, so I am actually originally from New York. I grew up in a small town called Messina. It's about 5 miles next to the Canadian border. So we called it Antarctica because it was super cold. And I think, I had 2 brothers, 2 sisters. And what's funny about that is in 97 or 98, my parents were like, we're done with this place. It is super cold. We didn't have power for like a week and a half. I remember just sleeping. I remember being that young, sleeping on the floor, cold, couldn't warm up. And we packed everything. We sold our house and we moved to Tyler, Texas, where my grandparents lived. And when we did that, they didn't have that much money. So they mowed lawns. My parents mowed lawns to make money. And once we got enough money, we moved into an apartment. And then after that, I know my parents got jobs elsewhere, and so we ended up moving into a house in Whitehouse, Texas, where I went to school in high school, and it was a weird time, those times like where you just were growing up and it was so fast because it was 10 years in New York and then bam, 8 years in Texas, and then it was like, oh, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm out away from home now. So.
And you consider yourself a Texan?
Yes, I do. A lot of other people are like, no, you spent 10 years in New York, you're a Yankee, So, no, I'm a Texan. I got a tattoo. I'm from Texas. So.
Who's your favorite football team?
The Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I know that hurt. That really hurt.
So you're a Texan.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right on. So what was high school like?
Man, high school was pretty cool. I played football for about a year. I didn't like it. I was smaller than everybody else. I had to wear glasses, so there was no way I was putting a helmet on and running around. And I was a super nerd. I had glasses, and I wore like white beater T-shirts and Jinko jeans and chili bowl haircut with it parted in the middle. That was a thing back then. So, and in small town, 3,000 people, so everybody knew everybody. Everybody's parents knew everybody. So yeah, it was pretty neat.
Can't get away with a lot of stuff in a small town like that.
We tried.
Yeah.
We tried. We definitely failed. A couple times, got in trouble with the police, and my mom sent me right down to the police station. She's like, nope, not having that. You didn't get caught, but you got caught from us. So sent me right back down to the police station. I remember community service, like 300 hours of cleaning coffee pots and
That's awesome.
Washing police cars, and it taught me a lesson. I was like, I'm never doing anything like that again.
Yep.
I will never be in trouble with the law ever again. And it worked because I've never been in trouble with the law after that.
That's awesome. You learned your lesson.
I've learned my lesson. No
Washing
more cleaning.
cars.
Yeah, no more cleaning cop cars.
That's awesome.
So,
and then after high school, you decided to join the military. Tell us about that decision, what branch, and kind of what steered you in that direction.
Yeah. So, obviously tomorrow is September 11th, right? So I think that was a big motivating factor to join something. I didn't know what. My first choice definitely wasn't the Marine Corps, but that's where I ended up. Cool little story about that. One of my good friends, Skylar from back home, we grew up together. He lived up the street, and one day he comes, he's like, hey, I got one of my good friends. He's a recruiter in the Marine Corps, and he wants to talk to you. And I'm like, I don't think so. So I left school. I know I left school early, and he shows up to my house, knocks on the door. I open the door, and the recruiter like sidestepped from behind the pillar, and it was over from there. Because once those recruiters grab you and grab that attention from you, it's over. You're in.
Yep.
Right?
What uniform were they wearing?
He was definitely in his Chucks.
Oh,
he was definitely in his Charlies, and huge salad, salad up on his chest. And I was like, man, I'm like, that must be cool to have that stuff, like really like look at that and envy that, and actually see a hero that I didn't know at the time was standing in front of me. So I was like, man, let's do it. So I signed up for the DEP program, the delayed entry program. I think I threw up multiple times when they first had me run 1.5 miles. I was always a runner, but never for like an actual distance. It was just like run around and mess around. But yeah, so that was horrible. And then pull-ups, absolutely horrible when I first got in. And, I built them back up. But no, the Marine Corps definitely latched onto me and never let go.
Never let go.
Never let go.
Just still have a hold on you.
It still has a hold on me till today.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what about any of your family members in the service too?
Yeah. So my dad was in the Air Force toward the end of Vietnam. So he flew missions back and forth from Thailand, I believe. And he was responsible for kicking Agent Orange drums. So, and that's where he ended up passing away in 2012. Complications from cardiac arrest in his heart and all that stuff, and they attributed it to Agent Orange. So my father was in the military. My uncle, he did 20 years in the Navy. So yeah, I had military presence for sure. My dad never pushed it on me though. He was never like, you know what, you should do this, because as soon as I wanted to sign up for the DEP program, I was 17. So he's like, okay, where do I sign? And it wasn't like a hard decision for him. Yeah. But I knew it was. I knew it was behind the scenes where he's like, oh man. And this was 2005, so we've already been in Afghanistan for 4 years. We've been in Iraq for 3-4 years. So I think he knew what the inevitable was. Right. So yeah, I think it was hard for him for sure.
Did he ever talk to you about his service and what he did, or was it something that he kind of?
It was definitely something he carried in himself. I think because you can tell from somebody's service when you look at their DD-214, you don't know what their service like entailed, but you know like where they were, what they did, what their job was. And he ended up getting medically retired out of the Air Force. He fell off a telephone pole. He was in communications and fell off a telephone pole, broke his back and hurt his back, and ended up retiring out after I think 8.5 years.
Oh, so, okay. And then what did he do when he got out of the military?
So he did everything. He was a jack of all trades, construction. He's wheeling and dealing cars up and down New York. Buy them for $3, sell them for $5. The old rust buckets, and just some of the cool things, like coming home one day and from school, and I remember him bringing a mail truck, with no brakes. And my mom's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you like? What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I'm gonna fix it and sell it up." And that's exactly what he did. So that's awesome. What he was known for up in the North Country was wheeling and dealing cars.
Wheeling and dealing. That's awesome. And then, so what job did you do in the Marine Corps, and did that have any?
Yeah, so I didn't take the ASVAB seriously. No, like I said, it wasn't my first choice to go in the Marine Corps, but they had a stranglehold on me, and so I went down the ASVAB and CCC, BBBAA. I ended up getting a 32 in the ASVAB, the lowest score possible, and they're like, "Well, we got 2 jobs for you. You can either go run with a gun or you can drive a truck." And I was like, "No, I know a little thing or two about trucks, so I think I'll go drive a truck." So that's exactly what I did, and that was my job in the Marine Corps. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I drove trucks for 6 years, and I was an instructor as well for a couple. And so I instructed 18, 19-year-old kids to drive multi-million-dollar vehicles which was pretty scary at times because some of them didn't even have licenses.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We had to get their license while they were in training.
While they're learning.
While they were learning to this huge truck in the backwoods of Missouri on 2-lane road. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
So when you went to boot camp, how was that?
Man, boot camp, it was a blur. It was so fast, but you remember certain details and certain funny stories that will live on in your head and the other ones that were there with you forever, right? And so obviously there 3 months from July of 2005 to October of 2005, and being in San Diego, the planes. I mean, you can have PTSD over airplanes nowadays, right? Like
watching them take off,
and just listening to them, and your drill instructor's yelling in your face. You're hearing an aircraft fly over. You can't even hear him, but you want to say something to him, and all you can say is yes or no, and you're hoping that you get the right one right. You know, it's 50-50 chance. You can say yes and get it right, or you can say no, and he jacks you all up.
Yep.
You know? So yeah, it was it was a humbling experience. I can attest to every single Marine before me, after me, that when you get that Eagle Globe and Anchor, that is the best thing in your life that you will ever accomplish. Whether it's in your job or anything else, it's getting that Eagle Globe and Anchor from your drill instructor and them putting it in your hand.
Yep.
Like that is, to this day, I can remember it, I can see it, I can smell it, because we were disgustingly dirty, like after all that stuff that went on. So
yeah, I think it's pretty awesome how they changed the way that they do that. You know, when I went to boot camp in '95, you had the 3 phases. The second phase, you're up north at Camp Pendleton, and then you came back for 3rd phase, and you kind of finished up at the depot. And you weren't a Marine until you crossed that parade deck at the very end.
Yep.
And they were still messing with people up until we got in line to go march across the parade deck. But from everybody that I've talked to that's had that experience of getting the EGA up on top of that hill, it's like you said, it's burned in their memory, and it's something that they'll carry with them forever. So that's super cool. So after boot camp, you went to MLS school.
Yeah, I went to MCT.
Oh, MCT. Okay.
Yeah, so I went to MCT, did all that cool weapons training stuff, did all the pointless hikes to kill your hips and your legs before you even get to the fleet. So yeah, that was fun. And then remember getting on the payphones and trying to call somebody really quickly for that first week or two you were at MCT because you had no idea what's going on. And you're just like, I want to call home. You call home really quick, and you're like, all right, I'm here, I'm good, I'm safe, I'm out, and send me some money, right?
Yep.
It's like, because I mean, as a private, I was getting like $400 a paycheck.
That's sad.
Every 2 weeks, and it was like $484 every 2 weeks, and I'm like, okay, well, here's food and sandwiches and the roach coach. They came around, and obviously the roach coach was like $10 for a Gatorade. So, our money went quick.
Went very quick
in the field. Yeah. So then, I went straight from there, and I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where I ended up coming back and being an instructor, and learning how to drive the trucks, learning how everything was operating. And like I said, this was December of 2005. So, or October, but probably December to January of 2005. And it was so cold. And I just remember the snow up to our hips. And we get to ride in these cool cattle trucks. They're old cattle trucks where they rebuilt them into like marine carriers. So yeah, that was a pretty fun time back then, learning all the systems, and it did not do anything to help me with the fleet at all. Like it did not prepare me at all for what was going to happen in the fleet when I showed up to the fleet.
So during boot camp, MCT, MOS school, did they talk to you guys, or like what was that vibe like? Because we're at war, right?
Yeah.
And where they're like, you got to take this stuff seriously.
Everything was said that if you don't take this seriously, you'll die. That was ingrained into our brains from day one of boot camp. from drill instructors that you saw their Iraq campaign ribbons. You knew it. Like you knew right then and there. They're like, okay, these guys have seen stuff, they've been through stuff, and we're in trouble.
Yep.
So, even in the instructors in the Motor T schoolhouse, MCT, those guys, they all ingrained it into us. Like, hey, this is some serious stuff, and this is not just playing war. You guys aren't just playing with regular guns, and you can't just respawn and come back.
Yep. It's real.
So.
What unit did you go to right after?
Yeah,
school?
So February 2nd of 2006, I showed up to Second Battalion Seventh Marines with 7 other Motor T operators, and all 7 of us were super close.
From boot camp on, or from?
It was probably from MOS school.
Okay.
A lot of us, because we were in the same class in MOS school, so I mean, we've had about a month and we had 3.5 months together before we went to 2-7.
Everybody went to 2-7.
Yeah. So 7 of us all in the same group went to 2-7.
Did you get to have any say of going to 2-7, or did they just say, hey, that's where you're going?
No, so they gave us 3 options. They were like Camp Pendleton or East Coast, West Coast, overseas. And my first option was overseas, because at the time we were like, oh, does that mean we get to go to Iraq first? Like, so that was our initial reaction. And so everybody, like, we started hearing Hawaii and like Quantico, and we're like, oh, these are cool bases. And then they're like 29 Palms, and I'm like, where the hell is that? I'm like, this sounds cool. And back then you don't Google like 2005, like you really, I mean, you Googled, but I mean, it was a flip phone era, right? So we're like, whatever, we'll find out. And, we show up in Palm Springs, California on February 1st. And we're like, man, this place is beautiful.
Beautiful airport.
Like, so beautiful.
And it was, you said what was a month?
It was February 1st.
So it's perfect weather.
So there was, it was like 65 degrees, maybe 70, maybe even 80. I just remember it like being warm. We didn't have haircuts. So they're like, all right, hey, let's go to Palm Springs. Let's rent a van, because we didn't know how to get to 29 Palms. There was no shuttle back then. It was like, get yourself to 29 Palms. We didn't even know where it was, right? So I remember going to Palm Springs, getting a haircut. It was like $38 for a high and tight. Like, it was ridiculous. And I was like, well, we're in California now. Like, so yeah, one of the other guys, he was 25, so he could rent, a vehicle. So we rent a van and we drive it all the way up to 29 Palms. Well, little did we know, our unit was waiting for us at the airport the day before on February 1st. They missed us somewhere in the mix. So
you wonder how the Marine Corps operates sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we end up getting there, and we get out of the van, and they're like, all right, your barracks is right there across base, and you're not taking that van. So we get all of our stuff, and we're dragging it across base. And obviously, everybody and their brother knew exactly if we were brand new Marines. And we get to this barracks, and I just seen all these Marines with their shirts off, drinking beers, drinking alcohol on the catwalks. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be fun, right? So they get up to us, and they take all of our stuff, and they bring it upstairs. And we're like, what the heck? They're bringing it up. Okay, this is cool. Next thing you know, they dump everything. Like, they dumped everything of ours. And they're screaming at us. They're like, you boots, blah, 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 blah. And just, being Marines. And one of the guys picks up a Motor T handbook. And he's like, you guys aren't grunts? And I'm like, no, we're Motor T. And he's like, okay. So they got all their guys to come pick up all of our stuff. And he's like, your guys' barracks is around the corner.
Oh, no.
And I get there. It's all quiet. It's nice. Open the doors. Brand new rooms. Brand new everything. And we're like, okay, this is the life, And some of those grunts came back over to us. We're like, we're sorry. We didn't mean anything like by that. We're like, we apologize. Because they know at the end of the day, we ran the show. Like, we would drive them everywhere. If it wasn't for us, they'd have to walk. Right. So they treated us really good. Sometimes more than not, but yeah, it was a weird experience in the fleet the very first day, because I didn't know anything that was going on, and I just knew my world turned upside down. And we found out that was their post-deployment. They just got back from Iraq in January.
Mm-hmm.
So half the battalion wasn't even there. So our motor T guys weren't even there.
Mm.
So I remember getting peanut butter and jelly in my room for like 2 weeks, going back and forth and just playing video games and not having any clue what's going on at all until our motor T guys started coming back. Yeah. And that was a different world because they just came back from combat and they wanted nothing to do with us at all because they knew they're like, oh, you know what? We're not deploying for another year, so we can mess with these guys for a while, you know? So that was pretty cool.
So you didn't deploy for a year then?
Yeah, we didn't deploy for a year.
Okay.
So 2006, we got there, and I think it was September of 2006. They're like, oh, by the way, you guys are going back to Iraq, which they told their other guys, hey, you're going back, but it was our first time, obviously. And so they're like, you're going to Iraq January of 2007.
Okay.
So that's when we called everyone and we're like, hey, we're going to Iraq. So
it's becoming real.
Yeah, it became real quick, especially doing all that training leading up to it.
The pre-deployment leave and all that stuff. Did you go back home? And
I went back home.
Yeah.
Yep, I went back home for a while. I think it was like 20 days because we didn't have leave because we only had like 7-8 months of leave. Yeah. To accumulate. And yeah, so it was like 7 or 8 months of accumulated leave, and it was only like 20 days.
Oh yeah.
So
did it feel good to kind of be back home and see everybody, and then, or was it kind of like a somber experience of, you know, going home and knowing that you're going out to Iraq and that might be the last time you see them again?
Yeah, I think it was, man, I barely remember my pre-deployment leave. Because it went by so quick, and it was like, okay, bye guys, I'm out. Like, I was I think I was ready. Yeah. Like in my mind, my body was ready. I was like 165 pounds. Like I was ready to go. Like I built up like 30 pounds of muscle in like 7 months. We were running like miles with packs on and gas masks and all that stuff for months, building up that endurance and building up everything, you know. So yeah.
Where did you guys deploy to?
Yeah, so we deployed to, it was southeast of Fallujah. Well, it's Camp Fallujah. And there's a place there called South Camp. And yeah, so we deployed to South Camp and we were attached to different units. So if I back up a little bit, in July of 2006, I got injured. I had a hernia.
Oh, okay.
So they put me into the armory. So I wasn't even with my guys to deploy over there. I was with them, but I wasn't with that platoon.
Oh, okay.
They sent me to a CAG platoon. So CAG is a civil affairs group where you hand out soccer balls, you kiss people and handshake and
winning hearts and minds.
You know. And so I did that for the first 2 or 3 months of the deployment. In South Camp Fallujah. Like we were based out of there, drive out to different spots that the Marines would mess up, and we'd have to go fix. We'd have to go fix the issue, right? Give money to the locals, be like, hey, we blew up your building. Here's some cash. So that was kind of weird for me because I'm like, okay, we're in a foreign country, we're at war, and we're giving these people our money, right? So for me, as a 19-year-old at the time, 1920, I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. Having that much money in my truck, because I've never seen that much money in my life, and having it sitting right next to me, you know, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of cash we're giving these people. Yeah. So yeah, we were in Fallujah and the South Fallujah, and we covered Al Anbar province. So we covered Zidon, which was south. We covered Sacagawea. It's like a hotel, like weird, like area, and then Karma. And Karma was what we used to travel to back and forth. Karma and then Zidon. We had operations there all the time. And then they were like, "Hey, we need somebody to go with golf platoon. So go down to the Zidon. You're gonna link up with them, and you're gonna be with them the rest of the deployment." So I was like, oh, wow, this is really real. Now, I mean, I was going out with civil affairs, but we weren't going on missions. Like, we weren't like going on patrols, anything like that. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into because I wasn't a grunt. Like I was a driver operator. Like I drove a truck and that's what I did. But they always say Marine first, we're always, a rifleman. So, they obviously were like, okay, this is what we're doing. So yeah, I ended up getting attached to a golf platoon and we stayed in Zidon most of the time, combat operations down there, walking through mud patties, like trails and going house to house and knocking on doors and talking to the locals and trying to get Al Qaeda out of the region. So yeah, that was most of my deployment was with them and sitting on post, doing my job so that those guys could rest, so they can continue to go back out and patrol back and forth. And anytime I wanted to go out and on a patrol, or I'm like, okay, I've done 4 hours on, 4 hours off for the past 3 days. I'm like, I think it's time for me to go out and see if I can go out with them, and I remember going out with them one day, and we're walking down this long road, huge road, and I just remember stepping over something, and it was just wet. Like I fell through like one of the little canals, and I just remember like mud all the way up to my hip, and then we started getting shot at. And I think that was my first actual firefight, where pulling the trigger and finding out where they were, and I think that was where I almost paused. Like everything in my world paused, because I was like, okay, stuff is very real, because I think that was in May of 2007. So I mean, that was like 4 months into my deployment where I haven't been shot at yet. And I was like, okay, wow, like it's not just some mission anymore,
right?
So it got real quick.
Yeah. What did that make you feel when you started hearing those bullets fly by you?
Well, it was mortars first.
Okay.
So it was definitely like, what was that? Like, because it's foreign to you, right? But some of the other squad members were like, we know exactly what that is. So they had to jump down. So everything that was on me already covered, I just jumped in it, right? So I'm in this like wadi of water, and I'm just like looking up and out and shooting my rifle and trying to figure out, and they're pointing at directions and yelling directions.
So it was an ambush.
So it was an ambush, yeah. Nobody ended up getting hurt. They backed off. They ran away, because that's what they normally did. They just took a few pop shots and bounced. Yeah. Right. They were never like right there at you and standing face to face with you, because they know they'd lose half the time. Right. So it was just pop shots, and you're like, okay, now it's over. Now what do we do? I'm all wet. I'm soaking wet. I'm going back to the fob. So that's what we did. Yeah. So after that first experience, then going back out, I mean, what potentially to expect now. Were you ready for the next time? Did you feel that you were? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I was ready. I definitely cleaned my rifle more, because it jammed a couple times while I was shooting. So it definitely like jammed, and I was like, oh, we're always taught, clean your rifle after everything, right? So I mean, I didn't fire it for 4 months, but we cleaned it here and there, but it wasn't like I didn't think I needed to at the time. Yeah, because I was like, I think we'll be all right, and it was just one of those times where like, hey, Weller, you're going on patrol. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll dust off this old thing and get out there. And what's funny is our deployment, our rifles, I was an armorer, right? So I did the armory thing after I got injured in 2006, and then went to Iraq and did the CAG. Well, while I was in the armory, we got to like pick our own weapons and stuff as the actual Marine. So I had a M16A2 with an ACOG on top of the handle, right? It was just screwed up there. It wasn't like on there. It wasn't the actual attachment, right? I had a 203 underneath. So me as a motor T operator, I had this M203 with this ACOG just sitting on top, Like, it was probably the worst rifle to be in a firefight with, right? Because it was not accurate at all. Like, and they make you BZO your weapon beforehand, but I didn't have that on beforehand. Like, we just added that on there, right? So that was a cool little funny thing, because they always used to make fun of me. They're like, oh, look, the guy that's not the grunt doesn't have an attachment on his weapon. Like, it's just sitting there.
And nobody helped fix it.
And no, it was not a fixable thing. Yeah. It was just like, okay, well, it's permanently on there, and that's what we had at the time. We didn't have the M16 A4. Like, some of us had A4s, some of us had M4s, a lot of us had A2s. Like, so it was the hand-me-down of the Army rifles, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
So how long was that deployment?
That deployment was 7.5 months. 8 months.
Okay.
8 months.
Did you go home when you planned to go home?
Yes. I had the option. So June 1st, 2007, I was up on post in the Zidon, and I just remember sitting there that day. Remember it being super clear, super hot. Like, as soon as that sun came up, it was from 0 to 100. Like, well, not 0 to, but it was like 80 to 100 real quick, and you felt everything. And I remember being on post, and I remember looking out in the distance, and I see this blue Bongle truck, and I'm like, oh man, they're always around. They're everywhere. This one had a tarp in the back, and this guy ended up taking the tarp down, messing around with the back of the truck. We weren't paying attention at all. I mean, we were paying attention, but we weren't, like, actually. Then I woke up, and then I don't remember anything before the truck. I don't remember anything after the truck. What I was told is the mortar came down. He launched it out of the back of the truck. And it landed probably right here behind us, and I had sandbags behind me. But what we did is when you're on post, we took Humvee glass and we put it in front of us, and on top. And I remember nothing else but everything was on top of me, because when I opened my eyes, I had no clue what was going on. I remember one of the first sergeants coming upstairs, grabbing me, and pulling me out downstairs. And I was awake, I was alert, but I got rocked. Like, I got rocked. And more than any other concussion thing that I've ever had in my life before. So that was kind of scary. And they're like, we got to call in the bird. So they called in the bird, and I got heloed out. And I passed out again. I passed out right when they got me near the bird. I passed out, and ended up getting some shrapnel through my hand. Ended up getting a grade 3 concussion, and they sent me to Baghdad. And I had nothing. I had no clothes. They cut everything off me because they just had to check everything out, right? So, cool thing is, I get in there. I start doing the x-ray thing. I'm in and out of consciousness because I'm just out of it. And one of the Army nurses got a pair of her sweatpants, and I put them on, and Army right down the side, right? And I think I wore those things for like 2 days while I was in Baghdad on the green zone. They took me to the green zone, and they're like, okay, well, you can go back, or... I mean, he's like, you're not going to go out in missions, like, or you can just go home. Like, what do you? And I'm like, well, I'm going back. Like, I'm not going back home. I'm going to go back with the guys. So I sat on Camp Fallujah from June, July, and August 15th. I think we came home. There was a mission August 2nd, and I was like, can I go? Like, I will want to go. Like, this is it. And that was our big mission called Sitcher. And it was an eradication of terrorists, like Al-Qaeda. We knew where they were. We knew where they were operating. We knew all their bases. And it was like an exterminate, like, get rid of these guys. And so we went in, did what we had to do with all, like, we had like maybe 3 platoons of golf, and then Fox showed up, and it was just like a huge battalion like push. Nobody passed away in that deal. Nobody from our battalion passed away or anything like that in our last mission, and we went home 2 weeks later.
So you said nobody passed away on that mission, but what about during that deployment?
Yeah, so we lost 10 guys.
10 guys.
Yeah, we lost 10 guys in 2007. Maybe more, I'm thinking. I know in 2005 they lost 10 guys, but I think we lost 10 or 11 in Iraq in 2007. So, and it was all sorts, patrols, IEDs, small arms fire. There was just a bunch. There was a bunch of casualties, and something that I learned in the Marine Corps was River City, where we couldn't call home or anything. So that was the scariest thing for like my parents, especially when they wouldn't hear from me for like a month, because we had casualty after casualty after casualty in the months, and it would just
constant
stop the
River
line.
City,
Constant River City for like a month. So that was rough. And then my mom told me that she got a call that I got flown out and that the injuries were unknown. So she had no clue what happened until I called her from Baghdad, and I was like, "Hey, I'm good, but I'm not good. I have no idea what transpired, but I'm okay." So that was like a relief for her.
Oh yeah.
So she always told me after, she's like, "I hated that. I hated that."
Yeah.
So
you went home back to 29 Palms.
Yep.
Did you get to go home post deployment leave?
Yeah. So I went home in September of 2007.
Okay.
So they gave us we had to stay in base for 2.5 weeks for reintegration, because they were like, "Okay, you guys just did all this stuff, get acclimated back to base, and then we can put in your chits to go home." So went home. It was awesome. Super cool homecoming. All my friends, my family, saw everybody, bought a brand new car, did everything a junior Marine would do if he came home from Iraq, and was like, I'm ready.
Yep.
I'm ready to be home and stay home. And so.
And you're awarded a Purple Heart.
Yeah. So, I was awarded Purple Heart on, I think it was October. It was October when I came back
off of leave. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then the same first sergeant that saved me, pretty much saved me, because we were catching small arms fire, they had anti-aircraft machine guns. They were just RPKs. They were just firing them off at our post.
Yeah.
So he gave me the Purple Heart. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And
that was back at 29 Palms in front of the battalion?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then George Bush came. That was pretty cool.
For your ceremony?
For the ceremony. He was supposed to be there for the ceremony. Never showed up for the ceremony. Came over. We had breakfast with him.
Oh, that's cool.
That was cool.
How many Marines got Purple Hearts during that ceremony?
There was anywhere between 10 and 20 that time. So there's anywhere between 10 and 20. And it was at the General's Lawn. So that was pretty cool.
After that, business back to usual? Or
yeah, so we're back on base. We got brand new Marines. So you know how that goes. It's like, oh, cool. Now we got brand new Marines. Now I'm in that position, right? So I'm in that position of okay, I just went to combat. Stuff is life and death, right? So I'm going to treat it as such.
Yeah.
And got these new Marines in. I don't think they were there for 3 days. And our battalion commander said, "Hey, we have a meeting at the base theater." And we're like, that's kind of weird. We just came from post-deployment leave. Who got a DUI? How many people got DUIs? What happened on leave? What is going on? So this is, let's see, we got back in August of 2007. September I went on leave. October came back. November, December of 2007. We went to the base theater. And he's like, okay, guys, you guys just came back from Iraq. Stuff's heating up in Afghanistan. And we need a battalion who is ready to go. And they chose you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't even been back 3 months yet.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us are, I think a lot of us, our morale went out the window.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because we're just like, we just got back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you want us to do? Like, so March of 2008, I did ADVON. So I was one of the first Marines from 2001 to 2003 to 2006. There was always operations in Afghanistan, but there wasn't a big Marine presence, right? So our battalion was the first Marines to be in Afghanistan since pretty much 2001, an entire battalion. So we get there in March of 2008 with nothing. No trucks, no overhead, not one thing knowing what to do.
And where'd you guys go into?
We went to Helmand Province,
Okay.
Afghanistan, and then we went to Farah Province as well. So our battalion of, how many did we have? 2,200 men? I think we had 2,200, or maybe 18. I think it was 18. We had an AO the size of Rhode Island. So it was not massive to us, or to a lot of people in the U.S., but for 1,800 people to have an AO the size of Rhode Island is huge. Like, huge. And with no equipment, right? So that took like 3 months for equipment to start rolling in. So we
what
were
you guys
sitting
doing?
ducks.
Just sitting there.
Yep. And we had no idea what to do. No clue.
You guys weren't doing missions at the time?
No, because we had nothing. Like, there's nothing we could do. We were going to the bazaars and going to Tim Hortons, right? Where everybody was comfortable on the base. And they're like, oh, look. I mean, Australians were there. Britons were there. Canadians were there. Like, Estonians were there. And then the Marines show up. And they're like, okay, what's going on, guys? And that was a pretty cool experience. Because in Iraq, we didn't have that. We didn't have, like, that different United Nation pact. So it was super awesome to get to know those guys and to, like, trade uniforms and trade shirts and trade jeans and, you know, boots. And our battalion commander got there and he's like, all right, your whole mission is to train Afghan National Army to help fight the Taliban. That was our entire mission until we got attacked by the Taliban. And when you attack us, you get stuff back. And it turned into missions of get them out of there. It was eliminate the Taliban in that district as quick and fast as possible so that we can train these guys and get out of there. Like, that was it. So we started going on missions. I was in a platoon motor T, and we were called combat trains. So we had 7 trucks, and all 7 of us, we went out every other day for 8 months. Every other day. There was maybe some days we were off for 2 days. That was it. But every other day we were out, and we were getting shot at every single time. It was a total 360 of Iraq, where it's like, okay, well, we're probably going to get pop shotted today, and, you know, or some IED, something's going to happen. But nothing like Afghanistan. Afghanistan was an entire, totally different monster. It was nothing but hills everywhere and people shooting from the hills and them having accurate weapons where they knew where to strike and knew when. And especially if you have a convoy leaving the front gate every day at the same time or every other day at the same time, they knew. And then there was only one road in Afghanistan. It was called Route 1. And everybody took that road. So they were not blowing that road up whatsoever. But they knew we had to get to the Marines out in the FOBs that were not on that road. And then they would put IEDs everywhere. So that was an experience of itself. Because, I mean, Iraq, you had those IEDs, but you didn't have, like, homemade explosive, huge IEDs. Like you had the little one, like little pop ones and catch on fire, but these were massive. So
were you guys discovering IEDs every day, or were you guys hitting them too, or
no,
discovering?
we were discovering them. And then other people were hitting them. So the first half of the deployment, they had Humvees. More than half the deployment had Humvees. When our Marines started dying, they started giving us bigger trucks, which I think was absolute crap, right? Because it's like, oh, these Marines have to die to start getting these MRAPs. Yeah. Right? We should have had those MRAPs in the very beginning, all throughout the convoy, right? And the Taliban knew it. The Taliban knew where the weakest point was of the convoys, and they would go after them. So,
and then you personally experienced something, and if you're comfortable talking about.
Yeah. So, September 19th, 2008, my platoon Sergeant Bell, got killed in Afghanistan through a roadside bomb. And I will never, ever forget that day. That day was the worst day of, I think, our platoon, because we were so close knit. Because I mean, we had all those times in Iraq with him too, and when we came home, like we were all good friends. Like we'd go drinking, things like that. So it was knew his family, right? So I think that was a morale killer, obviously, because in my Iraq, I never had somebody that close to me die, right? So seeing that, knowing it, taking him to the helicopter once he got killed, I think that was the most sombering experience of my life, right? And it made me, at 21 years old, grow up super quick, where it was like, okay, I'm taking this life for granted now. Yeah. Now it's time to buckle up and honor his legacy, right? He had a couple kids. He had 3 kids, all under the age of, like, I think 10 at the time. So it was super sombering. I was single at that time. And I think it just brought a lot of stuff back to me where it's like, man, I need to grow up. Like, I need to live my life, right? Yeah. And honor him. So I think that was one of the worst times of our lives, for sure.
And you're wearing that bracelet. That's in.
Yeah. So I think I have worn it for 6 years straight now. Like I think sometimes I look down at it and I'm like, and I hate to say it, and it's like, why am I still wearing this? Right? Because it brings stuff back to me where it hurts me. And then I'm like, actually, I know why I do it. Because people like Pat ask me who he is and what he did, and I tell them, right? So that I think that's where I take my pride in it, and I'm like, okay, well, he will never be forgotten because I won't let him, right? So
it's a great way to honor him. And when I first met you, I mean, it's very noticeable. And when you told me that story, I knew just from the way you talked about him how close you guys were and how much he meant to you and the rest of the Marines. And it's I think it's awesome. You're not going to let that memory go away.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
As painful it is. So yeah, thanks for doing that for a fellow Marine. I think it's awesome. And
yeah,
I know
absolutely.
His family's very appreciative because you guys are pretty close still, right?
Yeah. So we, his family wanted us to fly out in 2018, and they paid for everything, and we didn't want it to, but they persisted. Hey, this is what we want you to do, right? We want you to come out. We did a poker run, which was super cool. We had motorcycles in front of us, motorcycles in back of us, and they said, since you protected us, we now want to protect you.
That's
so
awesome.
They put us in a bus in the middle of all of them, and we went around to the different American Legions and things like that, and did a poker run and raised money for his scholarship. So that was pretty neat.
That's awesome.
I met his family in 2008, but at the time they didn't really. they were mourning,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I think I could take that back and start talking to them then, not just for a closure portion of it, but to let them know that even though he passed away, that they would have family forever, from all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But eventually you got to reconnect and they
Yep.
know that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And then that deployment, how long was that for you?
That was 10 months.
10 months.
Almost 10 months.
10 months. And did you come home prematurely?
Yep. Nope. I stuck it out again.
Let's do it. Yeah.
I got hit in July as well with an IED.
Mm-hmm.
I got flown out again.
Mm-hmm.
Same craziness. Different injuries. Different story that time.
So you hit an IED.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I had an IED.
Were you driving?
Yep. I was
Okay.
driving. My face clenched onto the steering wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Broke a couple teeth in my jaws, and yeah. So
Mhm.
that was pretty cool. Got flown out and stuff like that, and went back to base, and I stayed.
Mhm.
I stayed for the entire other time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I only went out on a couple more missions
Mm-hmm.
after that too,
Mm-hmm.
because they gave me the option.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, they don't give guys options if they're like
Right.
super bad, but I was like, hey, here's another concussion. I'm not dead. I still have my limbs. I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
so that was that.
And then coming back home, what was that like?
That was different
Mm-hmm.
this time.
How so?
Probably because I lost some guys that I actually knew
Mm-hmm.
from Iraq.
Mm.
So I knew them. I knew most of them from Iraq that
Mhm.
passed away. I'd say. So we ended up losing 20 Marines
On that deployment.
on that deployment, and that was rough.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was every other week.
Mhm.
Something was happening. We had 20 KIA. We had over 200 injured
Mm-hmm.
that entire deployment. That's a lot of guys
Mm-hmm.
to get injured. So we had to have combat replacements come in.
Mhm.
And then they were getting injured.
Mm.
And then they were getting combat replacements. So
Mhm.
combat replacements were getting combat replacements.
Wow.
And it was just a messed up time. And I don't necessarily say this, but we were the forgotten battalion. That's what we have put that out as our MO, right? Like that's what we were, because Marines went in there after us and did amazing things, and they got credit for it.
Mm.
We went in as the redheaded stepchild, got our butts kicked,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like we wanted something for it, but we wanted recognition. Like, hey, first Marines in a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
We killed a lot of Taliban
Mm-hmm.
and nothing.
And especially losing 20
Yeah.
Marines. Yeah.
So nothing from the president, no presidential unit citation.
Mm-hmm.
Our unit fought for that for years,
Mm-hmm.
and then they gave up.
Really?
We had guys get 2 Navy Crosses, a bunch of Silver Stars, no Medal of Honors,
Mm-hmm.
but 2 of those guys that got the Navy Cross should have Medal of Honors today.
Mhm. Aren't they fighting for one of them?
They're fighting.
still fighting?
Yeah, they're still fighting
For both of them, or
for
of them?
one.
For one.
For
of them.
one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that comes to fruition, because
Mhm.
that was an awesome
Yeah.
story. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you're back home, and now.
yeah, so my parents pick me up. I get married right away,
Mm-hmm.
like, because like I said, I wanted to grow up
Yeah.
quick.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to have kids. I'm done. Like,
Mhm.
this is what I want to do. And
Was this a Marine, or was this?
no, this
No.
was she was from high school back then.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And yeah, it was super surreal,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that I was back home, and I remember my mom driving, and I remember just pounding on the windshield for no reason,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I just got angry,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom, I just remember her eyes, and I remember the tears welting up, and
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "What happened to you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is going on?"
Mm-hmm.
So I knew then, right there, that something was wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't find out till 5 years later,
Mm-hmm.
4 years later,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, okay, well, something's up,
Mhm.
something happened,
Mhm.
and I never let it out. I just kept it in, right? So
were your parents notified when you were injured again?
again, the same, and she said it sounded like the same person as the year before, because it was a year apart. It was June 1st, 2007, July 1st, 2008, and she's like, it was a year apart. She's like, something. She's like, I don't know what the heck. It was right before 4th of July weekend. So she's like, are you kidding? So I actually called her 2 minutes after that lady called her, because I had a sat phone.
Oh, okay.
They gave me a sat phone because we're in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and there was stuff everywhere. And this is about another year later, so more technology. And I don't remember having a sat phone in 2007. Like I don't remember. Oh, because I was a very junior Marine, so it really didn't, like, they weren't going to give them to us. So, so 2008 was a little bit different. But yeah, they definitely got that call, and then I called them right after and kind of calmed them down a little bit. And from there, they didn't want me to go out. They wanted me to just come home. Like, and there was no way. There was no way I was leaving those guys there. So.
Were your parents and family members trying to get you to get out of the Marine Corps? Were they?
Yeah. So, so I got blown up in July, and September 1st of 2008, I re-enlisted. So in Afghanistan, with another buddy of mine, and we did it together. They gave us a cool little signing bonus, tax free.
Yep.
So we took it. Right.
What was your rank at this time?
I was a corporal.
You were a corporal. Okay.
Yeah, I was a corporal. I was corporal 2008 until 2011.
Okay.
So I was almost a 4-year corporal at the time. So yeah, that was a pretty neat deal. I think that after I re-enlisted, I was like, what do I do now? Because I knew that my battalion was awesome. And I knew that they were going to come back to Afghanistan. I knew for a fact. And I was like, I want this. Like, when you're deployed, and you feel way different than you are back in garrison. Right. And I think a lot of us, and I don't think a lot of us talk about it, but I think a lot of us felt it, that I would rather go out on my sword than come back here and die for nothing. Right. So a lot of people didn't think of it that way, but Marines do. Like, Marines all the time. Like, to this day, I mean, we just had 10 Marines killed in Kabul, and I'm like, man, I want to go over. Like, that was my first thought in my head. Right.
And you've been out for quite a bit of time.
For like 8 years. Right. And I'm like, man, I put my boots on, and I probably can't put my blouse on anymore, but I can do it. So yeah. So that was cool.
And then, so after your leave, you come back to 20 Palms again. And then when were you awarded your second Purple Heart?
So they had 40 Marines now on the general's lawn in January of 2009. And so they had 40 Marines on the lawn, and they, one by one, went all the way down. And I can't remember what general it was. I know it was one of those high generals that come in and give it to us and thank us for our service and pat us on the back and get us out of the way. And I just remember being totally intoxicated because we went out the night before, and you don't know about that stuff. Like, when they're doing ceremonies, and they're like, oh, hey, get out on the lawn. And we're like, oh boy. So I just remember the general being like, Jack Daniels. And I'm like, yes, sir.
He knows.
And yep. So he knew. And yeah, so it was different. And one of the things that stuck out in my mind is the memorial. We had a memorial with the crosses on them, with the helmets, boots, and the rifles and dog tags. And I remember giving flowers to Sergeant Bell's mom. To this day, I still remember that, and still looking at the pain in her eyes too. And like I said, I just wish like I could have went back in time a little bit and be like, hey, and gave her that reassurance, So Yeah, but that really stuck out in my mind because, I mean, you're standing on a field with all these Marines and you see 20 of these crosses. It's powerful. Like,
and that's one of your pictures on your Facebook page,
Yep.
right? You've had it for a long time.
Yep, had it for a long time.
You're right. It's such a powerful picture, and it's it brings a lot of different emotions.
Yeah.
A lot I think for really anybody that looks at it, you know, even if you hadn't served in the Marine Corps or in the service, you see that it's very powerful. It makes it very real. But then if you're a Marine, if you're in that unit or you knew somebody who passed away, it was so much different. Yeah. And don't forget to join us tomorrow night as we finish up Blake's story about his time after the military and what he's been doing ever since. Once again, Semper Fi and happy birthday, Marines.